my name is Alexa Phillips, and before I start my speech, I would like to preface with the fact that this laptop is screen mirroring what I have on the projector, so I can click through my slides easier. These are 5 of the most common sayings and 5 of the most common languages across the world. The likelihood that any of us in this classroom could translate any of these lines is pretty low and unlikely, but not necessarily our fault. As you can see, Salut translates to hello in French. We get es dir translates to how are you in German. Wohin hao translates to I'm doing well in Mandarin, which is a Chinese dialect. Un placer conocerte is Spanish for nice to meet you, and qual é seu nome is Portuguese for what's your name. Now, after seeing what these actually translate to, you might be thinking they're so easy, so how would more people not know them? Well, that's because being bilingual, or knowing more than one language, is actually a rare occurrence in the United States. Across the world, according to Preply.com's article, Bilingualism in 2023, US, UK, and Global Statistics, about 43% of people in the world are bilingual, with an added 17% being multilingual. That means they know more than 2 languages. Yet in contrast, according to the US Census Bureau, only around 20% of Americans comfortably speak a second language. That means that very few of us in this classroom are most likely bilingual. Personally, I've always been interested in other languages and other cultures since I was a kid. I used to ask for those language for dummy books, but I was never able to fully grasp or understand what it takes to learn a second language. That resulted in me not fully understanding how much learning a second language would benefit me. But whenever I saw a statistic on how few people in the United States are bilingual, I was interested in why this might be, what issues it causes, and how to fix it. Overall, the low percentage of bilingual people in the United States results in discrimination and confusion, and this can be fixed by learning a new language, which will result in a more open mind, higher cognitive development, more job opportunities, and overall, an easier time learning more languages. To help make our country a better, safer, more welcoming place to live, we must first start by opening our minds to other cultures. First, the lack of foreign language knowledge in the United States results in communication across cultures being prohibited. So, people are harmed by the lack of foreign language knowledge. And to illustrate this, I'll tell you about an example that includes a gas station worker named John. So let's envision this gas station. John just started working here, and it's in a very different part of town than what he's used to. He's been here for about 2 weeks, and the only person he's ever really worked with is a coworker named Frank. Frank tends to tell him some stories that seem pretty far-fetched, and so John doesn't usually believe him. One of these stories included a time where Frank claimed that he almost got robbed his first time on the night shift. Again, John doesn't really believe most of these stories, but in this situation, John was actually on his first time on the night shift by himself. So, everything has been going as expected though. The night is relatively slow, and John is walking around doing a normal inventory around 11 p.m. This is where our story begins. John sees 2 women. He first notices that one is in a hijab while the other is wearing a face-covering veil. He doesn't think much of it until he hears them talk, except it's not in English. He goes back to his counter but keeps an eye on them. They're still speaking another language and looking at products. John thinks back to Frank. Could he really have been getting robbed his first time on the night shift? I mean, why else wouldn't they be speaking English if they weren't doing anything suspicious? And why is that one lady covering her face if she's not planning on trying not to get caught? John tries to push these ideas to the side, but his nerves get the best of him and he figures it's best to call the police. The police arrive and one of the women cannot speak English. She tries to explain herself to the police, but it's not working. The other woman also tries but is unable to convince them, resulting in them both being detained for the night. After further investigation, it is revealed that they were merely shopping, and the lady who did not speak English was asking about the other woman's opinion on which products were suitable for her kids that she was unable to return to that night due to her being detained. Since the worker had no knowledge of other languages, instead of seeing the 2 women as having a conversation, he was instead confused, scared, and intimidated, therefore assuming the worst. Another example of this that I would like to tell you about is from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, where around 10% of the charges filed against various companies in relation to job discrimination were based around country of origin. That means to discriminate against someone based on the country where they're from, which typically goes hand in hand with accents and languages. Now, just after hearing the first scenario and my other example, you may be thinking that it's pretty specific, that this particular instance was a combination of many factors that led to the gas station worker's decision in calling the police, and you would be right. But this happens so often that within the world of job discrimination and otherwise day-to-day occurrences, like how I explained to you with John, it is so common that it has a name. According to current Washington University and former Stanford professor John Bao, the subconscious discrimination to someone based on their accent or them speaking another language is called linguistic profiling. Now, within the criminal justice system, this is also very important. Research by linguistics, Charisse King and John Rickford, show that there have been numerous court cases which the results were heavily impacted by linguistic profiling. Now, a specific example that they discussed was how in the trial of George Zimmerman for the fatal shooting of a young black teenager, Trayvon Martin, the jury sided with Zimmerman. King and Rickford said that this decision was largely in part due to language discrimination and linguistic profiling, as the key witness in proving Martin's innocence used African American vernacular English, and people saw her as inarticulate and unreliable, therefore siding with Zimmerman. Miscommunications like that happen very often and can be prevented by a general knowledge of other languages. Knowing other languages allows you to have an open mind when it comes to non-English speakers, and you can improve your own life and other skills by learning another language. So, as we can see, the overwhelming majority of Americans being monolingual clearly causes issues, but there's an extremely obvious and easy solution. People need to learn a foreign language. So, the first step in learning a foreign language is to choose your desired one. This can be something that maybe you might realistically move there. You might realistically know someone who speaks it, and overall, the language interests you. Next, use an online resource such as Duolingo. It's a great start, and it's extremely doable to learn a language, but not become completely fluent, according to fluentin3months.com. Another way to learn a foreign language is by watching movies in that new language. This is similar to how babies learn English, as they just listen and listen to people, and over time start responding to the different cues that people make in this language. So, by doing this, you pick a show or movie to watch in which they use the language, and try understanding without captions, but don't be afraid to use them. Another way to do this is to watch a show that was adapted into another language, so you might already know some of the material. Next on the list, befriend people who speak this language. That might sound a little bit hard at first, but you can meet someone online, you can find someone in your town, and you can have a pen pal from another country that can help work on your fluency. Next, practice every single day. Even if it's for a small amount, it will help. And you want to try to practice different parts of the language, example being formal, conversational, writing, speaking, and reading. A great way to do this is by setting a daily goal in which you can watch movies like I discussed, speak to someone, or playing Duolingo, because that all counts as practice and will overall help you achieve your goal of learning a new language. Now, by learning this new language, you will have a better understanding of people who speak a foreign language and will be a more flexible person in general. Even if you don't think that you will ever have to use another language, we live in America, where more cultures interact than in any other place on earth, and a country in which there is no official language. Therefore, you will always be encountering people who do not speak the same language. Now that we've examined and seen how easy it can be to learn a second language, we can look at the benefits of what happens if you do so. So, what happens when you learn a foreign language? There are, of course, plenty of personal benefits. You will be able to communicate more effectively across translation and not have to rely on outside resources. You have more job opportunities. And your cognitive abilities will improve. According to Carmarthenshire.gov's article about bilingual education in Wales, bilingualism strengthens your cognitive abilities, or, in other words, makes your brain work harder and helps strengthen your overall intelligence, and you will naturally learn not to discriminate. Next, benefits to the world. Our country can become a safer, more welcoming, and better educated place by learning a second language. And you can take steps towards this future by learning one. Now, hopefully we have all learned a thing or two about language, and maybe one of you in this room could start practicing soon. Communication is key to our world, and without it, society would collapse. That's why it is so vital that more Americans learn how to communicate across languages and bridge the divide between cultures. Right now, as teenagers, our brains are not fully developed, meaning that we are still in the prime time to learn a new language. To recap, the lack of foreign language knowledge in America leads to issues in translation, discrimination, and an overall disconnect between our citizens. By taking time to learn a new language, not only will you help yourself naturally learn not to discriminate, but you will have better job opportunities, higher cognitive skills, and overall improvements to your life. We live in America, the melting pot of the world. Hopefully we can all be inspired to take the next step to connect with each other, and by taking into account what I talked to you about today in this speech, you might experience it in ways that you never thought were possible. Thank you.